federal court in Idaho. On November 3rd, 2008, Mr. Duncan was also sentenced to 6 life terms in the Idaho State Court for the murders that he committed to the other family members in Kootenai County, Idaho. On January 26, 2009, Mr. Duncan was extradited to Riverside County to be prosecuted for Anthony's murder. As all of you are now aware, Joseph Duncan pled guilty to the first-degree murder of Anthony Martinez and admitted all of the special circumstance allegations associated with that murder this morning in court in the Indio Superior Court. The District Attorney's Office, Mr. Duncan and his attorneys have all agreed that Mr. Duncan will be sentenced to a term of imprisonment of life in prison without the possibility of parole. I have also required that as part of that plea, Mr. Duncan waive any and all appellate rights with respect to his guilty plea entered this morning. I want to make something perfectly clear. Having been a prosecutor for over 22 years, having been a Superior Court judge for almost 11 years, I have never seen a person in my professional career that is more deserving of the death penalty than Joseph Duncan. He deserves the death penalty for the murder of Anthony Martinez. This was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in my career. But in doing so, I have spoken to Anthony's family, including Diana. I've spoken to the federal prosecutors up in Idaho. I've spoken to the state prosecutors in Idaho, and I've spoken to the state prosecutors in Washington. And based upon the fact that Mr. Duncan has already received multiple death sentences in federal court, and the fact that it was Anthony's family's desire that we accept his plea offer, I agreed to do it. It should also be pointed out that Anthony's family participated in and testified in the penalty phase of Mr. Duncan's federal trial in Idaho. So, in essence, they have played a role and a significant part in a jury deciding ultimately that Mr. Duncan deserved the death penalty. After having been in the criminal justice system for 33 years in California, it's also quite clear to me that the federal criminal justice system will execute Mr. Duncan long before the state of California would ever consider doing that. As I've indicated, it was the family's request that the District Attorney's Office accept this plea agreement, and that was a significant factor in my agreeing to this disposition that was entered into this morning. Mr. Duncan is scheduled to be sentenced in the Indio Court on April 5th, 2011 at 9:30. With that, Diana?
No idea what I'm going to say. I didn't write anything down because I wanted to speak just from my heart and just let everybody know that it was 14 years. It was almost, just within 2 weeks of being exactly 14 years that we waited to get to the point we're at now, and it was the longest road that I've ever been on, and probably anybody would ever be on. We did agree to the life to the plea for life, because it's just been so long, and we just didn't want to wait. I mean, I don't ugh, I don't know what to say. We just didn't want to wait any longer. We had waited so long and been through so many different things up and down, and we just didn't want to wait any longer. And we did believe, that it would be faster when, if he gets a death penalty in the federal case and goes to death for that a lot faster than California would. So we did. We just agreed, and I just know that this was the hardest thing. I waited 14 years to just fall apart, because I just wasn't sure if I fell apart before then that I would actually make it. But we did, and we're here, and he's convicted, and we're ready for a conclusion. We're ready for it to be done. It won't ever be closed, but it'll be done. It'll be over, and we can now, mourn Tony's death the way we should have in the beginning. When we buried him, we didn't know who did it at all. We had no idea. We had no answers. We had nothing. And the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and Beaumont, they never forgot. They never, ever forgot. They always looked and always cared and always talked to us. And for that, I know my family and I will be eternally grateful to both departments and any other departments that District Attorney's Office, anyone that was involved in it, they never forgot. And it was really big for us that they really cared, and they never, ever forgot. And like I said, we'll be eternally grateful to all the departments that were involved in it. And that's it. Thank you.
I don't think anyone who has been involved with this case over the past 14 years will ever forget. These types of cases leave an indelible mark upon all of us and the community. And, well, it's just horrifying that someone like Mr. Duncan can terrorize so many people and murder so many people before he's actually apprehended. And that's unfortunate for all of us. I'll answer any questions that any of you might have at this point. Yes?
He was already sentenced to death, as you said. Did it ever become a factor, the amount of resources and, in fact, the amount of money that would go into a trial like this when you made your decision?
Never. I created the homicide prosecution unit at the Riverside County DA's office many years ago. I supervised that unit for 8 years and made the death decisions along with the previous district attorney. That's never a consideration as to whether or not you seek the death penalty. I understand the public is concerned about that, but as a prosecutor, my ethical and legal obligations are such that that doesn't enter into the equation. How do you put a monetary figure on someone's life? You can't. And so the economics aspect of the death decision is never considered in any death decisions this office, will make under my administration.
And one follow-up question to that. You said that you've spoken with the federal folks up there in Idaho. Did they give you any sense of time frame? You say it is a lot. Obviously, the execution will happen a lot faster in federal than in California. But any sense to the time frame when that might happen, and how much time do you think you're saving by ending it now and sending them back?
Well, I can tell you this. Back when I was in the DA's office, I prosecuted my first death penalty case in the early 1980s. That individual is still on death row over 25 years later. Based upon what we've seen with Timothy McVeigh in the federal system, they carry out the death penalty in a reasonable amount of time. California does not. And in speaking with the federal prosecutors on several occasions over the past 2 weeks, I'm pretty confident, as they are, that the hope and expectation is that Mr. Duncan will be executed within the next few years.
How important was it to bring Mr. Duncan to California? And do you agree with starting this case in Riverside County to begin with?
I absolutely do. I think it was appropriate to bring Mr. Duncan back. I don't think anyone, you know, as children, were kind of told, oh, you can't let your kids get away with murder. Well, as adults, I expect us to do the same thing, not let anyone get away with a murder. So in that respect, everyone needs to be held accountable. I think Mr. Duncan this morning was held accountable. And so I think it was appropriate to bring him back and to prosecute him for the murder of Anthony Martinez.
How soon do you expect him to be sent back to Idaho?
Well, he's going to be sentenced April 5th, and we're already making arrangements. Actually, we're going to send him back to federal prison from where he came, back in Indiana. Indiana? And we have already made those arrangements, and if we can do it, he'll be on his way April 6th. Yes.
You've obviously, while you were on the bench, you saw a lot of murder cases, and if I'm not mistaken, more than a couple of child murder cases.
Correct.
Do you want to characterize this case on a scale of heinousness to this defendant?
You know, I prosecuted personally as a DA over 50 murder cases, including 5 death cases. I've presided as a judge over 7 death penalty cases, have sentenced 5 people to death as a judge. And you're right. I've sentenced some of the worst of child killers, and Mr. Duncan ranks right up there in the top 3, without a question.
Can you elaborate on how the settlement came about? Was it just that the defense came forward, or was there some discussion prior to them coming forward with the prosecution about possible?
No discussions on behalf of our office. We were prepared and ready to go to trial within the next 30 days as a death penalty case. The defense a couple of weeks ago came to us and extended this offer to plead guilty to life in prison without the possibility of parole, waive all their appellate rights, get sentenced within a very short period of time. And before I accepted that offer, I wanted to sit down and talk to the family members, as well as contact the other prosecuting agencies and kind of get a feel for what they were going to do and how they felt, at least on the federal side, how confident they were with respect to Mr. Duncan's death sentence in federal court.
Did this settlement at all enter into your office's review of each of the county's death penalty cases?
I'm sorry, what now?
Did this settlement at all coincide with the district attorney's office's review of each of the county's death penalty cases that are still pending?
Well, I can tell you this. If Mr. Duncan hadn't received a previous or 3 previous death sentences in federal court, I would have rejected the defense offer out of hand. I never would have considered it whatsoever. Mr. Duncan, again, let me make it clear, Mr. Duncan has earned the right to be executed. And you can only kill someone once. And I don't care if it's in federal court, in the state of Washington, or in the state of California. So without him previously receiving the death sentence in federal court, there's no way I would have even considered this type of disposition.
Any estimate of how much this case has cost Riverside County so far?
I don't get involved in those kind of numerical calculations. We seek justice, whatever it costs. Any other questions? All right. I'm sorry. Rich?
Strategically, would it have been, I mean, it's water under the bridge now, but would it have been better to have, say, held Duncan's warrant until the Idaho federal case got resolved, or somehow they had not issued that knowledge that was murder stuff together, and then bringing Riverside County and trying for that penalty case?
Well, I inherited the case when I came to office on January 3rd the way that it was. But, you know, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's a good idea. again, the federal appellate system is going to take some time, and I think Anthony's family needed justice. And so I think it was appropriate to bring Mr. Duncan back and prosecute him for the murder that he committed in this county.
Now, this morning the judge spoke about consecutive life sentences. Is Riverside County expected to give him multiple life sentences or just the life sentence related to Anthony's death?
Well, I wasn't in court this morning. Mr. Duncan is going to receive a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. There's no consecutive to it. He'll be in prison until he dies, one way or the other. And we've assured that and guaranteed that by his plea this morning. All right, thank you all very much.